Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Women's Access to Education podcast. Today, I'm just going to be talking a little bit more about women's access to education, why I care about this, and kind of why I started doing this podcast. So this podcast is actually for a theology project, but I decided to do a podcast because I thought it would just be kind of fun and I could get kind of my opinion out there more than if I were to do posters or a different type of form of media. And this idea really came when I watched the movie Half the Sky, and just seeing how these women lived, it was just unimaginable to me. I always had access to education. I always had access to good education. So just seeing how these women lived and how they had to travel to such extreme, almost 2 hours each way to get their education, it was just such a foreign idea to me. So I really thought that this was something important. And I really wanted to focus on women's access to education in developing countries. But since that was such a broad topic, I kind of needed to narrow it down. So I did Africa because when researching, I found out they had some of the lowest levels of educated women and women going into secondary school. And they had high levels of teen pregnancies and child brides. And education is not just a one-way thing. It really dismantles the whole economic, social society. Everything revolves around this education. And when these young women don't get this education, it's a spiral effect. And like I've talked about in some of my other podcasts, it really leads to a cycle of poverty. These women are just back in this cycle because this is what their mom did and this is what their grandma did, and there's no way for them to get out of this. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about education in Africa. Across the African continent, millions of women and girls are fighting for the right to go to school, pursue their dreams, and break free from the cycles of poverty and inequality. I think many of these young girls dream of going to school, and they just don't have the opportunity to because it's not something that's realistic for them. It's so far away and it's such a dangerous trip. And even when they do get this education, it's nothing compared to how education is in the United States. Yet, despite progress in many regions, challenges like poverty, gender-based violence, early marriage, and cultural norms still keep many girls from stepping foot in a classroom. I think one of the things that really blew me away was the cultural norms, because I thought, it might sound arrogant, but I kind of thought that everyone had a general similar opinion that, yeah, all women should have the right to education. But a lot of these people in Africa believe that no, these women should be staying home, taking care of their family, and then the men go to school. And so I just found that such a crazy concept that in 2025, when it's so normalized for women to be going to school and women to be going to college and women to be having jobs even when they have children, that in other countries it's such a foreign idea. I plan on talking more about stories about different African women who have overcame incredible odds to receive an education and are now leading change in their communities. And this could be just from rural villages or to big urban careers. These stories of resilience and hope remind us that of the transformative power of education, because at the end of the day, for these women, education is so powerful, especially women who live in rural areas. They're just used to living in that rural area. There's no way out for them. And some of them might love staying there, but a lot of these young girls, I think, want to be educated and want to have a career and want to be able to provide for themselves and don't have to just rely on their husband or rely on their father. But this journey isn't easy to help get women more education. There's many barriers like lack of infrastructure, financial, and social stigma created significant obstacles. And yet, across Africa, we are witnessing an inspiring shift. Women are demanding their right to education, and in doing so, they're changing the course of history for generations to come. Thanks to these women, now future generations of women are going to continue to become educated. This is the biggest thing. When one woman becomes educated, it trickles. I've talked about this a lot about the multiplier effect, but this is so important in women's access to education. The multiplier effect, when one girl gets educated, she helps educate so many other people. It's just so amazing what one education can do. So, I also have talked about in other episodes the current state of education for women and girls and kind of the struggles. I talked a lot about the struggles. But there also are so many good schools and stuff. They're just so limited and don't have as many spots. So it's limited for these young women. But I think the most important part is that we need to break down these barriers of cultural norms and also really help the funding. These schools don't need to be in amazing condition, but these children need to be able to learn in safe environments. And the problem is when we're talking about such impoverished areas, especially these rural areas, it's just not really realistic in a lot of situations for them to have schools built unless people come in from different countries wanting to support, but their own people don't have the funds to do this. So this is really what leads to the multiplier effect. And also in all my other podcasts, it's kind of like a slideshow presentation. In this one, I just did one photo to kind of really nail the point down. The focus is these young women. That is the focus. We want these young women to be able to get educated so that they can educate their children, and it's generations of women. And not only is it just that, it is amazing for the economy. In one of my other videos, I talked about how $15 to $30 trillion have been lost because of these women's lack of education. And this is nothing that these women have done to themselves. It's purely just luck and where they have ended up. To end this was a short little podcast, but when you educate a girl in Africa, you don't just change her life, you change entire communities, economies, and futures. So I'm going to continue exploring the power of education, the challenges, and the triumphs that come with the fight for equal access to learning for women across Africa. Thank you for listening.